Alchemy is a type of pseudoscience formed by speculative thought that tried to transform base metals, like lead and copper, into more valuable metals like silver or gold. As well as transforming metals, alchemy sought to cure diseases and extend life beyond the natural lifespan by finding the philosopher's stone. The term alchemy was first used in Latin Europe in the 12th century. When it began, it was an aspect of astrology, which both attempted to determine the relationship between man and the cosmos and to use this information for man's benefit. A lot of times, alchemy had a more magical aspect, but alchemists were the first to devise ingenious ways of distilling liquids, making acids and bases, preparing medicines, and creating tougher and sharper metals. The Arabs are responsible for most of the pioneering in these studies, as well as recording and leaving the results for us today. In the Middle Ages, alchemists in Europe learned from the Arabs and began their own contributions of alchemy. Accounts of the alchemists' lives led us to believe that they were most interested with things spiritual rather than temporal. They were inspired by the idea of making man perfect, devoid of disease and the limitations of both physical and mental weaknesses. Alchemy has long been known as the black art. This name has nothing to do with any sense of evil, but rather that it has always been hidden in its secretive processes. Alchemy was not just a science, but also a religion. Many of the alchemists' work were greatly affected by divine beliefs. Their efforts were initiated by philosophical thinking. Although proud of their work and by no means trying to keep the scientific world from growing, methods such as symbolism were used by alchemists to conceal their true doctrines. Their chiefest study was to wrap up their secrets in fables and spin out their fancies in veils and shadows, whose radii seem to extend every way, yet so that they meet in a common center and point only at one thing. Elias Ashmole. The beginning masters of alchemy used symbolism without standardizing their symbols or terms, thus requiring an intense familiarity with the subject as well as great intuitive power to decode some of their enigmatical statements. Alchemists created images from myths and allegories so that those who would be able to decipher their code are those who are capable of thinking and feeling what the images mean. Many of the secretive symbols that the alchemists used were not meant to be decoded using any sort of logical interpretation. A few manuscripts describe the alchemical process as a form of personal experience. And although alchemy is thought to be an ancient form of science, aspects of alchemy continued on throughout the years.
Alchemists made their living by working for royals or other patrons. The reason alchemists would get hired to work is because of the idea of obtaining a newfound wealth appealed to many patrons. A few alchemists got lucky and stumbled across experiments that amazed their patrons. However, there were a few not so lucky. After a while, when alchemists did not provide their patrons with what they were looking for, some tried to cheat the system. As their patrons were going into debt, some alchemists would secretly add amounts of gold to the experiments, making it seem to yield better results. Although few alchemists died at the gallows, the ones found out to be cheating were usually tried, found guilty, and then hanged. Among the people we know to be alchemists today is one Sir Isaac Newton. During his lifetime, Newton was not known to be an alchemist. It was after his death, when his manuscripts were read, when he was found to have practiced alchemy. However, reviewing Newton's work was not an easy task. Like most alchemists, Newton used a set of symbols to hide and conceal his work, using the sun as the symbol for gold and the moon for silver. If that wasn't enough, he also wrote his findings in a variety of languages consisting of Latin, ancient Greek, and 17th century English. Although not all of Newton's symbols have been figured out to this day, we can still perform the exact experiments Newton was doing and see the results he may have found.
Since the ancient Greeks, the idea of what is scientific and what is not has been split between philosophy and technology. For the Greeks and Romans, and even into medieval Europe, philosophical ideas have always been openly shared with the public to some degree or another. Technologies, on the other hand, were associated with a craft and not considered a science. Even in ancient Greece, where scientific ideas were openly discussed and published, many of the technologic skills of the day were kept secret to protect the livelihood of the craftsmen who knew them. In the modern scientific community, the open exchange of ideas is considered fundamental to scientific innovation. However, even today, secrecy can be seen in scientific research and discovery. Many governments keep sensitive and/or dangerous research programs locked in secrecy, claiming matters of national security. Many companies also sponsor research programs beneficial to them, and sometimes limit or suppress the availability of results through patents, non-disclosure agreements, and censorship to maintain a profitable edge over the competition.